Hello everyone and welcome to the Airfix YouTube channel. In this video we're going to build and paint the 1/72 scale Sherman Firefly Starter Set. This is a new tooled starter set from Airfix, so the kit in the box has been specifically designed to be fast and easy to build whilst retaining a great level of detail. The parts count has been reduced and things have been simplified a little bit, so it's excellent for people who are just getting started in the hobby or who haven't been modelling for very long. They also make really quick and fun builds for more experienced modelers. As well as the kit, inside the box you also get a small selection of Humbrol acrylic paints which are specifically chosen to paint this model, a small brush and a little tube of Humbrol poly cement to glue everything together. The kit comes complete with markings and painting instructions for a single vehicle from 1944, and everything can be found here on the rear of the pack in these full colour diagrams. We'll be following those towards the end of the video. To build the model we need a good area to work on, so we'll be using the Humbrol workstation with an A4 Humbrol cutting mat. There are two areas either side for tool storage, and the holders at the back will take water pots, paints and the instructions. The whole thing can be easily picked up and put away after a modelling session, but wherever you use at home, just remember to protect your worktops underneath from any damage. The tools that you'll see being used in this video are from the Humbrol Modeller's Toolset, which are a great starter set of tools for anybody getting into the hobby. It contains a modelling file, a set of tweezers, some cutters for removing parts from the sprue, and a hobby knife. If you can get hold of some Humbrol acrylic primer, it's a great way to give the model a nice smooth base coat before you start painting with the supplied acrylics. We're going to use it in this video, but this isn't a necessary step, so don't worry if you don't have any primer at home, you can paint straight onto the plastic. So let's get started and take a look inside the box. We obviously have the kit itself. This consists of 2 sprues of green injection moulded plastic. In the smaller bag we have an Airfix paintbrush, 3 Humbrol acrylic paints and a small tube of poly cement which we'll use to glue the kit together. The instruction leaflet details the construction process for the kit, and it's important to read this before you start, as there are certain steps which need to be completed in sequence or they won't be accessible later. These parts on the hull, for example, won't be accessible once the hull is closed, so follow the instructions carefully. All of the kit's parts are held together with this frame, which is sometimes called a sprue. In the instructions, the parts are called out first by their frame letter, followed by a part number, so you can easily find them by first identifying the frame and then having a look next to the parts to find the small tab which contains the part number. When you've identified the parts you need, it's time to remove them from the sprue, and here you can see us trimming them away using the cutters from the Humbrol toolset. You may notice that the cut wasn't made right up against the part, and this is to prevent damage, but it does leave us with a small tab of protruding plastic. This can be easily trimmed away using the hobby knife. Using the edge of the part as a guide, a quick cut sees most of the excess plastic removed really easily. The file is then used to clean the part up completely, and we want to remove any extra plastic just to make sure that everything fits together perfectly. Any excess plastic in these areas may interfere with the fit, so a good going over with the file, being careful not to damage anything or go too far, just cleans everything up nicely, ready for the Humbrol poly cement. Poly cement doesn't work like an ordinary glue. Instead, it melts the plastic together on the kit parts, and that can make it a little bit more tricky to use. Applying the glue like this directly from the tube can lead to applying too much, and if that spills out onto the surface of your model, it can lead to unsightly lumps and bumps, or worse still, it can get onto your fingers, leaving you with fingerprints on your model, which you absolutely don't want. To make life easier on the more visible glue joins, why not try cutting these parts off your kit box and using one to form a palette and then folding one up into a point to form a little applicator. Now we can apply the glue to one piece and use the point of the applicator to pick the glue up and apply it directly to the parts, giving us way more control over where the glue goes. Alternatively, if you can get hold of some Humbrol Precision Polycement, it has a needle tip applicator which gives you total control. So now we can apply our polycement to the little card palette instead of straight onto the kit, and then use the folded card applicator to put the glue right where we want it and in a much more controlled fashion. Here you can see we're concentrating our glue along the inside face of the kit parts so that the polycement doesn't bubble outwards onto the surface of the model even when those parts are pressed together really tight. Here the rear hull is being manoeuvred into position and then given a good squeeze, and none of the polycement has bubbled outwards. Tweezers can come in really handy with the smaller parts on this kit. Here you can see us using the tweezers to manoeuvre the upper hull details into position, and the way this kit has been engineered, the glue join for these tiny pieces is on the inside face of the hull, so even if you're a little bit careless with the polycement, there shouldn't be any glue visible on the outside face of the model. Here you can see the lower hull assembled, all nice and neat with no excess glue, using just those two basic techniques for the cleanup and gluing of the parts. So it's time to move on to the turret. The same techniques were used throughout the turret, with one exception, and that was for the gun mounting bracket. This had to be glued only on the parts shown in the instructions to allow the gun to move up and down after it had been fitted. Once the part was carefully manoeuvred into place to avoid getting any glue on the little T-section on the end of the gun barrel, everything was held firmly in place, but the gun was free to move up and down, maintaining the elevation movement. Other than that, the same clean up and glue technique was used for all the details, and the turret was quickly assembled. The assembly is complete, but you notice that we've left the model in 4 separate sub-assemblies. The tracks, the hull and the turret are all separate so that we've got easy access all the way around for painting. Before we use the paints that are supplied with this starter set, we've laid some cardboard down on the workbench to protect it from the spray, and we're going to give everything a nice coat of Humbrol's grey acrylic primer. The parts are mounted onto some masking tape which has been stuck down with the sticky side facing upwards, and then a nice coat of the Humbrol acrylic primer is sprayed all round, making sure that there are no areas left untreated. The same process was followed on the turret and the hull, but instead of mounting on masking tape, we created a crude kind of handle from rolled up cardboard, just allowing us to turn the model around and get the primer into all the different areas. As we mentioned at the start of the video, don't worry if you don't have any primer at home, this step isn't essential. We've done it on this model just to give us a nice, smooth, even surface onto which we can now apply the acrylic paint supplied with the starter set, but you can paint onto the bare plastic. It's time to begin painting now, so we've got the acrylics and the brush supplied with the starter set. One thing we will need though is a palette. We'll be using this one from Humbrol. The reason we need a palette is that we're going to thin these paints with a little bit of ordinary tap water just to make them go down nice and smooth. We'll be starting with Humbrol 159, which is the base coat olive drab for the tank, and before we do anything else we're going to give this paint a nice stir. Sometimes these kits may have been sat on the shelf for a little while, so the paint may separate in the pot, but after giving it a quick stir it's gone nice and smooth and we're ready to move on. After transferring some of the paint into the palette, the tap water was added to the ratio of about 50%. This should preserve the opacity of the paint, but also cause it to self-level on the surface of the model. This should avoid any three-dimensional texture in the paint layers, which will help us get nice smooth coverage. The additional water will also mean the paint stays wet for longer, so we can cover these large surfaces in one big application, again helping it to self-level and keep everything nice and smooth. We're going to be applying this diluted acrylic in several thin layers, so we don't need to worry too much about being neat with it. We just need to make sure that everything's covered as smoothly as possible. Try not to leave any areas where primer or plastic is showing through your base coat, and just get everything covered as neatly as you can. In between all of the details, this can be tricky sometimes, so turn the model around or turn the brush around and make sure you get into all those nooks and crannies. The first coat of paint is probably going to dry into a horrible streaky mess like this one, but don't panic, just trust in the process. We're going to apply a second coat of the same 50% diluted green paint over the top. We're going to repeat this 2, maybe even 3 times to build up nice, smooth, solid coverage with the paint. After we've applied a couple of layers, you can see here that the paint has started to get good coverage. There are just a few areas where it maybe needs a little bit more work. A third layer is applied over the top, and after 3 layers, what we're left with is actually a really smooth, solid layer of green paint, but all of the detail underneath is perfectly preserved. We haven't added any thick, gooey layers of paint to block up the detail. This looks nice and smooth, and it's time to move on to the next steps. As with the green base coat from the first painting step, the matte black supplied with the starter set is also diluted with ordinary tap water before being applied all over the tracks and around the outside of the road wheels. The Sherman Firefly depicted in this kit was fitted with rubber padded tracks, so the majority of this assembly will be left in the black base coat, so make sure you get nice even coverage, otherwise it may look streaky. Also remember, this area is covered in lots of raised details, so be sure to get into all the recesses and don't leave any primer or plastic showing through. After a couple of coats with the black, the tracks are fully base coated and they're ready to get their details picked out with Humbrol 53, which is silver. This is the final paint supplied with the kit, and here you can see we're just using the tip of the brush to catch the raised details on the track pin and guide horn area of the tracks. If there are any areas which you catch accidentally with the silver, these can simply be painted over with the matte black mixture which we used for the base coat. Once the tracks are painted, any paint which is on the mounting spigots for the tracks needs to be removed so we can get a good glue join. A quick rub over with the foil gets rid of any of the paint, and then we can use the palette and applicator from earlier in the video to apply some poly cement to these raised pegs. With the glue applied, the tracks are simply pushed into position and held firm while the glue takes a hold. It's easy to fit these tracks and alignment shouldn't be a problem, but be sure to check first. And once those are on, that's the assembly of the entire model complete, and you can see that we've got a really nice smooth model of a Sherman Firefly. All that's left to do is to pick out the machine gun barrels using that matte black paint, and it's time to move on to the markings. If you're feeling particularly brave, you could try painting the Pioneer tools with the matte black paint as well, but we're going to leave ours in green. The final step in this model is to apply the markings. These can confuse beginners to the hobby as they're not stickers and they don't peel off the backing sheet. Instead, they'll only slide free of the paper once it's been soaked in water for a few seconds. Cut the selected transfer from the backing sheet with a knife or scissors, and then, using tweezers to hold it carefully, immerse it in ordinary tap water for a second or 2 and then put it aside to soak. After about 30 seconds to a minute, a gentle pressure with a brush should make the marking slide free of the adhesive on the paper, and that means it's ready to apply. Before sliding the marking into position, the surface is brushed with a little bit of tap water. This just keeps the transfer floating around on the surface of the model, and that means we can manoeuvre it into position with gentle pressure from the paintbrush. The position of these markings is shown on the rear of the starter set box, so using this as a guide, the transfer is pushed gently into position before some dry tissue paper is used to remove the water. Just make sure that you get all the water from underneath, or as much as you can, without using too much pressure. If you apply too much pressure, you may move the marking, or worse still, rip it. So just give it a gentle touch and then allow it to dry. With all of the markings applied, everything was left to dry for a couple of hours, and that was it. The model was complete and we'd finished the Sherman Firefly Starter Set. If you've been building along with us at home, you're now forgiven for pushing the model around your workbench and making 1 or 2 tank noises. We did, but we're not going to show it in the video. We hope that if you're a beginner to the hobby, if you're just starting out, or if you're considering getting into the hobby of scale modelling, this video has helped in some way to show you one or two of the basic techniques. We'll be doing more of this kind of video in the near future, but until then, thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you again next time.